The saxophone cried through smoky air. Something shifted in my chest. You know that feeling when the world tilts? When everything changes in a heartbeat? That was happening right now. Sarah laughed at Marcus's joke. Her voice sounded distant, underwater. The bourbon burned my throat as I lifted the glass. That was when I saw him. He sat alone at the corner table. Shadows clung to him like silk. Even in dim amber light, I could see sharp angles. Dark hair catching stage gleam. But his eyes stopped my breath entirely. Silver gray and ancient. They found mine across the crowded room with intensity that flushed my skin. Have you ever felt the entire world tilt on its axis? That moment when everything you knew becomes questionable. That was me right now in this French Quarter jazz club. Friends chattering around me. This stranger looking at me like he could see straight through to my soul. I should have looked away. Any rational person would break that connection. Focus back on friends. Their drink. Their normal Saturday night. But I couldn't move. Those silver eyes held me captive. I found myself drowning willingly. Music swirled around us. It created a cocoon of sound, separated us from everyone else. The trumpet joined saxophone in haunting melody, made my heart ache with longing for something I couldn't name, something I had searched for my entire life without realizing. You know this feeling if you've ever experienced true recognition, when two souls find each other across time and space. Most people feel it once if they're lucky. Some never feel it at all. But when it happens, there's no mistaking it. Sarah nudged my arm, breaking the spell for just a moment. What are you staring at? She asked, following my gaze across the room. But when I looked back, the corner table was empty. Shadows that embraced him now held only vacant air. The lingering scent of something dark and intoxicating. My heart hammered against my ribs. I scanned the crowd desperately. Had I imagined him? The bourbon wasn't that strong. I'd only had one drink, but there was no sign anywhere. No mysterious man with silver eyes. You look like you've seen a ghost. Marcus chuckled, raising his own glass. The irony wasn't lost on me, though I couldn't explain why. I forced a laugh and turned back to friends, but my mind was elsewhere, already replaying those electric moments when time stood still. The band launched into slower rhythm. Couples moved onto the small dance floor. Sarah grabbed Marcus's hand and pulled him up, left me alone with thoughts and phantom memory of silver eyes. I should have been annoyed at abandonment. Instead, I felt relieved. I needed a moment to process what just happened. I finished bourbon and signaled the waitress for another. Alcohol helped steady nerves, but couldn't erase the feeling. Something fundamental had changed in my life. That brief connection across crowded room had awakened something sleeping far too long. My name is Evelyn Cross. I am 42 years old. I own a small antique shop on Royal Street. I spend days surrounded by beautiful old things other people discarded or forgot. I understand the value of history, the weight of memories embedded in objects that outlived their original owners. But tonight I felt like the one forgotten, the one waiting centuries to be rediscovered. The thought startled me. Centuries? Why? Think in terms of centuries when I barely lived 4 decades. Yet the word felt right somehow, like it belonged in my vocabulary in ways that made no logical sense. Those who work with antiques understand this feeling. When you handle objects older than yourself, you start thinking differently about time. You realize how brief human existence really is, how precious every moment becomes when you truly grasp its fleeting nature. Waitress brought my second bourbon. I sipped more slowly this time. Music had shifted to something bluesy and melancholic, matched my suddenly introspective mood. Around me, the club pulsed with life and laughter, but I felt separate from it all. Suspended between reality and something like a dream. Sarah and Marcus returned breathless and grinning from their dance. "You should get out there," Sarah said to me. "There are some gorgeous men here tonight." But I wasn't interested in gorgeous men, plural. I was fixated on one man in particular. One mysterious stranger who vanished like smoke the moment I looked away. I made polite conversation, but attention kept drifting to that empty corner table. Who was he? Why had he been sitting alone in shadows? Why did looking at him feel like coming home and falling off a cliff simultaneously? But here's what happens to those of us who spend too much time alone. We start creating connections where none exist. We read meaning into coincidence. We transform strangers into destiny because we're desperate for something real. Night we're on. Eventually, Sarah and Marcus decided to call it an evening. They offered to drop me off, but I declined. I wasn't ready to leave yet. Something kept me anchored to this place. This moment. Like I was waiting for something to happen. After they left, I moved to the bar and ordered another drink. The bartender was an older man with knowing eyes. Seemed to read restlessness in my expression. "First time at Preservation Hall?" he asked. I nodded. "It's a magical place," he continued. "Sometimes people find exactly what they're looking for here. Sometimes they find things they didn't know they were searching for." His words sent shivers down my spine. Had I been searching for something? My life felt complete on the surface. I had business, friends, comfortable routine. But there was emptiness growing inside me for years. Longing that no amount of success or companionship could fill. As if summoned by my thoughts, familiar scent drifted through air. Dark and intoxicating. Like midnight jasmine mixed with something indefinably masculine. My pulse quickened. I turned slowly on Barstool, knowing somehow he would be there. He stood just behind me, close enough I could feel heat radiating from his body, despite cool October air that followed him from the street. Up close, he was even more devastating. Taller than I'd realized from across room. Lean with aristocratic features belonging in Renaissance paintings. Skin pale as moonlight and flawless in ways that made me want to reach out and touch, but still his eyes captivated me most. Silver gray and ancient, they held depths stretching back through time itself. Looking into them, I felt like standing on edge of abyss, one promising either salvation or destruction. "Maybe both. May I?" he asked, gesturing to empty stool beside me. His voice was velvet over steel, just a hint of accent I couldn't place. European, certainly, but from another era entirely. Refined pronunciation bred out of modern speech. I nodded, not trusting voice to remain steady. He settled onto stool with fluid grace. Bartender appeared instantly, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "The usual?" the bartender asked. Stranger nodded. Moment later, crystal tumbler filled with expensive whiskey appeared on bar. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to music and feeling electric tension crackling between them like live wire. Every nerve in my body was aware of his presence. The way he held himself with perfect stillness. Way his fingers curved around glass. Way his breathing synchronized with jazz rhythm. I should have been nervous. Woman alone at bar with mysterious stranger should have every alarm ringing. Instead, I felt safer than I had in years. Like I'd found my way back to something lost long ago. Without realizing it was missing. "You felt it too," he said finally. Voice barely audible above music. It wasn't question. He knew somehow connection between us had been mutual. Whatever force drew my attention to him across crowded room had been pulling him toward me as well. "Don't understand what's happening," I whispered. Admission felt dangerous but necessary. Keeping it to myself would have been betrayal of something sacred. He turned to face me fully. Intensity of his gaze made breath catch. "Understanding will come," he said. Some things cannot be rushed. Some connections transcend boundaries of logic and reason. His hand moved across space between us. Fingers brushed against mine where they rested on bar. Contact sent shockwaves through entire system. Just a touch. Briefest pressure of skin against skin. But felt like lightning and silk and coming alive all at once. Every person who has experienced true connection knows this feeling. Moment when two souls recognize each other across time and space and circumstance. Most people are lucky if they feel it once in lifetime. Some never feel it at all. But when it happens, there's no mistaking it for anything else. Music swirled around us. I lost myself in silver depths of his eyes. Rest of world faded away. Nothing existed but this moment. This man. This inexplicable pulver-writing very foundation of who I thought I was. Time moved differently when he was near. Minutes stretched into hours or compressed into heartbeats. I couldn't tell which. All I knew was never wanting this feeling to end. This sense of completion I'd never experienced before. Couldn't imagine living without now that I'd found it. Band finished their set. Crowd began to thin. But we remained at bar, locked in bubble of mutual fascination. He told me his name was Lucien. Didn't offer last name. I shared mine in return. Watched something flicker across his features when I said Evelyn. Recognition, maybe. Or remembrance. Like he'd heard it before in different contexts. You own the antique shop on Royal Street, he said. Again, not question. How did he know that? I hadn't mentioned work. Hadn't given any indication of what I did for a living. But somehow he knew exactly who I was. Instead of being alarmed, I found myself leaning closer. Drawn by mystery of him? Yes, I said. Cross Antiques. Have you been in? Not yet, he replied. But I've walked past many times. There's something about old things, isn't there? Way they hold on to past. Stories they could tell, if only they could speak. His words resonated with something deep inside me. This was exactly how I felt about my collection. Each piece had history. Previous life adding layers of meaning to beauty. Objects became more valuable when they carried weight of human experience. What kind of stories do you think they tell? I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. Most people saw my antiques as decorative objects or investments. Few understood emotional connection I felt to each piece. Stories of love and loss, he said. Voice growing softer. Of passion that burned so bright it left scorch marks on everything it touched. Of hearts that beat for centuries, waiting to find their other half. Poetry of his words, made chest tight with emotion. No one had ever spoken to me like this before. With such depth and beauty and understanding of romantic soul, I kept hidden beneath practical exterior. You speak like you've lived those stories yourself, I said. Immediately regretted the observation. Sounded presumptuous, intrusive, but instead of being offended, he smiled. Expression transformed entire face. Hadn't we all, he asked. In one way or another, aren't we all searching for that connection? That makes existence worthwhile. That person who sees us completely and loves us anyway. If you've ever been in love, you know what I'm talking about. That desperate search for someone who understands your soul. Someone who makes you feel less alone in this vast universe. Someone who makes all the pain worth it. His words hung in air between us, heavy with meaning. Was he talking about love? About possibility of finding it with me? Thought should have been ridiculous. We just met. Known each other less than an hour. But every instinct was screaming this man was significant. This meeting was destiny rather than chance. Bartender announced last call. I realized with surprise hours had passed without my noticing. Club was nearly empty now. Just few stragglers nursing final drinks and lingering ghosts of melody. I should go, I said. Though words felt like lies. I didn't want to go anywhere. Wanted to stay in this moment forever. suspended in magic of new connection and infinite possibility. As should I, Lucien agreed. But his eyes said something different. They said stay. They said this is just the beginning. They said trust me to show you wonders you never dreamed existed. We walked out together into cool October night. French Quarter was quieter now, but still alive with energy, making New Orleans unlike anywhere else. Street musicians played on corners for tourists and locals alike. Scent of bayonets drifted from late-night cafes. Wrought iron balconies cast intricate shadows in lamplight. My apartment is just a few blocks away, I said, hoping he would offer to walk me home, hoping magical evening didn't have to end quite yet. I know, he said. Again, that mysterious knowledge he shouldn't possess. Instead of explaining, he simply began walking in direction of my building. As if he'd been there many times before, we walked in comfortable silence through narrow streets I'd traversed thousands of times. Tonight they felt different, charged with possibility, like very air was humming with anticipation of what might come next. When we reached my building, Lucien stopped and turned to face me. Streetlight caught silver in his eyes, made them almost luminous in darkness. Beautiful, he said so softly I almost didn't hear. Absolutely beautiful. Heat rose in my cheeks at compliment. At 42, I'd long since stopped expecting such reactions from attractive men. My ex-husband had made sure of that during bitter divorce 3 years ago. But Lucien looked at me like I was work of art, like I was precious and rare and worth treasuring. Anyone who has felt unworthy of love knows how powerful such recognition can be. When someone sees beauty in you that you've forgotten existed, when they look at you like you're exactly what they've been searching for their entire life. Will I see you again? I asked before I could stop myself. Vulnerability in question made me want to take it back immediately. But it was too late. Words were out there hanging between us. You will, he promised. Leaned forward to press gentle kiss to my forehead. Contact was brief and innocent, but sent fire racing through veins. Every cell in my body lit up at his touch. I had to grip doorframe to keep knees from buckling. When he pulled back, I could see something shift in his expression. Hunger, maybe. A recognition of same fierce attraction threatening to overwhelm my common sense. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me properly. Might cross that final boundary between strangers and something more. But instead, he stepped back with what looked like considerable effort. Soon, he said. Word carried weight of promise. Sweet dreams, Evelyn Cross. He disappeared into shadows with uncanny grace. One moment, he was there solid and real and making my heart race. Next, he was gone. Like he'd never existed at all. I stood on sidewalk for long minutes, staring at empty space where he'd been. Had tonight really happened? Had I really met man who made me feel more alive in few hours than I'd felt in years? Or was this all elaborate dream brought on by too much bourbon and too much loneliness? But my lips still tingled from his forehead kiss. My skin still hummed with awareness of his proximity. Deep in my chest, something had awakened. Something I thought had died along with my marriage. Hope. Pure, unadulterated hope that maybe I wasn't destined to spend the rest of my life alone. I climbed stairs to my apartment in daze. Everything looked same as when I'd left, but nothing felt same. Air itself seemed different, charged with possibility and promise and lingering scent of midnight jasmine. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by a bedroom window looking out at French Quarter spread below me. Somewhere out there, Lucien was walking through these same streets, breathing same air, existing in the same world as me. Thought filled me with contentment I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I wasn't alone. Not really. Even though he wasn't here physically, I could feel him. Like warm presence in back of my mind. Like promise of things to come. I finished wine and prepared for bed, but sleep felt impossible. Body was humming with energy and mind racing with questions. Who was Lucien really? How did he know so much about me? Why did being near him feel like coming home? But as I lay in bed staring at ceiling, I found questions didn't matter. Not really. All that mattered was certainty I would see him again. This was beginning of something extraordinary. Those of us who have waited decades for love know how precious such certainty feels. When you've given up hope and then suddenly it returns. When you realize your story isn't over yet. When you understand the best chapters might still be unwritten. Last thing I remembered, before drifting off, was feeling of his lips against my forehead. His whispered promise, soon, word echoed in my dreams like prayer, like vow, like key to everything I'd ever wanted but never dared hope for. I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and the lingering taste of dreams on my lips. Dreams of silver eyes and velvet voices and promises whispered in shadows. For a moment I lay perfectly still, afraid that moving would shatter whatever spell had been cast over me the night before, but the magic remained. Even in harsh morning light, I could still feel him, like phantom touch against my skin, like echo of his presence in the very air around me. You know how some nights change everything? How you wake up and the world looks different? Colors more vivid, possibilities more real. That was this morning for me. I felt more alive than I had in years. I showered and dressed with unusual care. Not because I expected to see Lucien today. He'd given no indication of when we would meet again. But because I felt beautiful for the first time in months, desirable, like a woman worth waiting for rather than one who'd been left behind. Walk to my shop took me through the heart of the French Quarter, past the jazz club where everything had begun. In daylight, it looked ordinary. Just another brick building with shuttered windows and a modest sign. But I could still hear echoes of last night's music. Still smell traces of bourbon and possibility. Cross. Antiques sat on Royal Street between a vintage clothing boutique and a shop selling handmade jewelry. I'd chosen the location carefully 3 years ago after my divorce. Wanted something that felt like mine alone. Something Richard couldn't touch or taint with his bitterness. I unlocked the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. Immediately, the familiar scents wrapped around me like a warm embrace. Old wood and leather, and the faint mustiness that clings to objects that have survived decades or centuries. This was my sanctuary, my refuge from a world that often felt too sharp and too cold, but this morning something felt different. The air itself seemed charged, electric, like the shop was holding its breath. Waiting for something to happen, I went through my usual morning routine. Turned on lights, checked the humidity levels, made coffee in the small kitchen area behind the main showroom. But I kept looking toward the front windows, expecting to see a familiar figure walking past. Silver eyes catching the morning light dot. Stop being ridiculous, I told myself. You met him 12 hours ago. You don't even know his last name. But reason had little power over the certainty growing in my chest. Whatever had started last night was far from over. The bell above my door chimed and Mrs. Henderson walked in. She was one of my regular customers. An elderly woman who collected Victorian mourning jewelry with an enthusiasm that might have seemed morbid to others. But I understood her fascination. There was beauty in objects created to honor loss. Poetry and gems chosen to represent eternal love. Good morning, dear, she said, settling her purse on the counter. You look positively radiant today. Did something wonderful happen? Have you ever tried to explain a feeling that defies explanation? How do you tell someone that a single glance across a crowded room has rewritten everything you thought you knew about yourself? How do you describe the certainty that your life just split into before and after? Just a lovely evening, I said. But my smile must have given away more than I intended because Mrs. Henderson's eyes lit up with curiosity. A man, she asked with the directness that comes with age. A special man. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Perhaps, I said. Too soon to tell. She nodded knowingly. The best ones usually are, she said. The ones worth waiting for don't announce themselves with fanfare. They slip into your life quietly, like they were always meant to be there. Her words sent shivers through me. Like they were always meant to be there. That was exactly how being with Lucien had felt. Not like meeting a stranger, but like remembering someone. I'd temporarily forgotten. Mrs. Henderson browsed the Victorian cases while I tried to focus on inventory. But my mind kept drifting to silver eyes and promises of soon. What did soon mean? Today? Tomorrow? Next week? The uncertainty was delicious torture. Around noon, the delivery truck arrived with a new shipment. 3 crates from an estate sale in Charleston. I'd bought them sight unseen, based on photos and a detailed manifest. Sometimes that was risky, but I'd learned to trust my instincts about which collections held hidden treasures. I signed for the delivery and had the driver place the crates in my back room. I'd open them later when I had more time, but as I returned to the showroom, I caught a familiar scent drifting through the air. Dark and intoxicating. Like midnight jasmine mixed with something indefinably masculine. My heart began to race before my mind caught up. I turned slowly toward the front door, knowing somehow, hoping desperately. And there he was. Lucien stood on the sidewalk just outside my shop, looking at the display in my front window with the same intensity he'd focused on me the night before. In daylight, he was even more striking. Tall and lean with that pale perfection that seemed to glow from within. He wore a dark coat despite the October warmth. And when he finally looked up and met my eyes through the glass, my breath caught in my throat. He smiled. Just a slight curve of lips, but it lit up his entire face and sent warmth spreading through my chest like whiskey on a cold night. The bell chimed as he entered, and suddenly my small shop felt even smaller. His presence filled the space, changed the very atmosphere, made everything else fade into background. Good afternoon, Evelyn, he said, voice like velvet wrapping around my name. You have a beautiful collection here. Thank you, I managed. Though speaking suddenly felt like an enormous effort, every nerve in my body was aware of him. The way he moved with fluid grace, the way his eyes traveled over my displays with genuine appreciation, the way being near him made me feel simultaneously safe and gloriously unsafe. Have you been collecting long? He asked, moving toward a case filled with antique jewelry. His fingers traced the glass above a particularly ornate Victorian brooch. The gesture was casual, but something about it made my skin tingle. Of 15 years, I said. Started as a hobby and gradually became an obsession. There's something about objects that outlive their original owners. They carry stories, memories, emotional weight that transcends their material value. He turned to look at me, and the intensity in his silver eyes made me forget whatever I'd been about to say next. Spoken like someone who understands the true nature of eternity, he said softly. Eternity. Such a strange word choice. But it felt right somehow. Like he was speaking a language I'd always known but never learned to use. You mentioned stories last night, I said, finding my voice again. What kind of stories do you think this one tells? I gestured toward the Victorian brooch that had caught his attention. Lucien stepped closer to the case, so close I could feel warmth radiating from his body. Smell that intoxicating scent that made my head spin with wanting. This piece, he said, studying the brooch intently, belonged to a woman who loved deeply but not wisely. She wore it on her wedding day, not to the man she adored, but to the one her family chose for her. The garnets represent the passion she was forced to hide. The pearls, the tears she shed in private. Anyone who has ever sacrificed their heart for duty knows this pain. The ache of choosing security over love. The weight of living a life that looks perfect from the outside but feels hollow within. His words painted such a vivid picture. I could almost see her. This unknown Victorian woman trapped by circumstance and social expectation. How could he know such specific details about a piece I'd only acquired last month? That's remarkably specific, I said. Do you have provenance on this piece I don't know about? Something flickered across his features. Too quick to interpret, but distinctly uncomfortable. Just intuition, he said. Old pieces speak to me sometimes. Tell me their secrets. The way he said it made me think he was telling me something important. Something beyond the obvious meaning of his words. But before I could pursue the thought, the shop door chimed again. A young couple entered looking for an engagement ring. I excused myself to help them, but remained acutely aware of Lucien's presence. The way he continued to move through my shop, studying pieces with that same intense focus, occasionally pausing at items that seemed to fascinate him. When the couple left 20 minutes later with a lovely Art Deco ring, I found Lucien standing before a display case in the far corner, the one containing my most unusual pieces, objects that didn't fit neatly into any particular category, but possessed an indefinable quality that had compelled me to acquire them. He was staring at a small silver mirror, ornate and tarnished with age. I'd bought it from an estate in Savannah. The seller had insisted it came from New Orleans originally, had been in the same family for generations, but she'd seemed almost relieved to part with it. Interesting piece, you said. I walked over to stand beside him. The proximity made my pulse quicken, but I tried to keep my voice casual. 18th century, if the hallmarks are authentic. Beautiful workmanship, but there's something about it that makes people uncomfortable. What kind of something, he asked. But his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Hard to describe, I said. Customers look at it and then quickly look away, like they've seen something they weren't meant to see. I've always wondered about its history. Who owned it originally? Why it ended up being sold. Lucien was quiet for so long. I thought he might not respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Some mirrors show more than reflection, he said. They hold on to images, memories, moments too powerful to fade completely. You know how sometimes someone says something that makes perfect sense even though it shouldn't? That was this moment for me. I'd always felt there was something unusual about that mirror, something that went beyond its obvious beauty. But I'd never been able to articulate exactly what. You speak like you know mirrors like this personally, I said, studying his profile as he continued to stare at the antique glass. Something about his expression was different, guarded, like he was remembering something he preferred to forget. I've encountered similar pieces, he said finally, in my travels. Antiques aren't just my interest. They're my specialty. What kind of specialty? I asked. Are you a dealer? A collector? An appraiser? Something like that, he said. But his evasiveness felt deliberate, like he was revealing exactly as much as he intended and no more. I restore things, he continued. Objects that have been damaged by time. Help them reclaim their original beauty. There was something about the way he said restore that made me think he wasn't just talking about furniture and jewelry. But before I could ask what he meant, my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and sighed. Sarah, probably calling to get details about last night that I wasn't ready to share. I need to take this, I said to Lucien. He nodded and returned his attention to the mirror while I answered Dot, so Sarah said without preamble, Tell me about the mystery man. What mystery man? I asked, though I could feel heat rising in my cheeks. Don't play coy with me, she said. The one who had you staring across the room like a lovesick teenager. Marcus said he'd never seen you look at anyone like that. I glanced over at Lucien. He was still studying the mirror, but something about his posture suggested he was listening to my conversation. Could he hear both sides of the call from across the room? That seemed unlikely, but it was nothing I said to Sarah, just someone interesting. We talked for a bit, just talk she pressed, because he looked ready to spontaneously combust every time you looked at him. Those of you who have protective friends know how persistent they can be. Sarah had appointed herself my guardian after my divorce, determined to see me happy again, even if it meant interfering in ways that made me uncomfortable. Sarah, I said firmly, I'll call you later. We can talk then? Fine, she said. But I want details. Real details. Not the sanitized version you give when you're trying to protect yourself. After I hung up, I found Lucien, watching me with amusement in his silver eyes. Protective friends, he asked, the most protective, I confirmed. She means well, but sometimes caring feels like intrusion, he finished. I understand. Solitude becomes a habit. Makes us forget how to let people in, exactly, I said. Though I was surprised by how perfectly he'd captured my feelings. Most people saw my single lifestyle as temporary. A phase one would eventually outgrow. But Lucien seemed to understand that some of us choose solitude not from fear, but from preference. The afternoon sunlight streaming through my front windows was beginning to fade. I realized we'd been talking for over an hour. Time moved differently when he was near. Minutes stretched or compressed in ways that defied normal measurement. I should let you get back to your work, he said, as if reading my thoughts. But there was reluctance in his voice. Like he was no more eager to end our time together than I was. Actually, I said before I could stop myself, I was about to close early today. New shipment came in and I want to start unpacking it. Unless, would you like to stay? I could use a second opinion on some pieces. The invitation surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise him. I wasn't in the habit of inviting near strangers to examine my acquisitions, but something about Lucien made me want to share my treasures. To see them through his obviously knowledgeable eyes, I'd be honored, he said. And the formality of his response made me think again of another era, when men spoke differently, when courtesy was an art form rather than an afterthought. I flipped the sign on my front door to closed and led him toward the back room where the 3 crates waited. The space was cramped, filled with storage shelves and packing materials and the controlled chaos of a working antique shop. Having him here felt intimate in ways I hadn't anticipated. I pried open the first crate and began removing items wrapped in tissue paper. A Georgian silver tea service, several pieces of Staffordshire pottery, a collection of ivory miniatures that made me catch my breath. Lucien moved closer to examine the miniatures. His proximity made my hands shake slightly as I unwrapped each delicate portrait. These are exceptional, he said. Look at the detail work. The emotion captured in such small space. You know about miniatures, I asked. They're not everyone's specialty. I've always been drawn to portraits, he said. Faces tell stories, especially old faces. You can see entire lifetimes in someone's eyes if you know how to look. He picked up one of the miniatures. A young woman with dark hair and sad eyes, probably painted around 1800 based on the style. As his fingers closed around the small frame, something strange happened. For just a moment, the room seemed to shift. Shadows deepened, temperature dropped, and I could swear I heard something like a whisper. Too soft to understand, but unmistakably, Lucien went perfectly still. His entire body tensed as if he was listening to something only he could hear. The miniature trembled in his hands. Are you all right? I asked. But my voice sounded far away, even to my own ears. He set the miniature down with exaggerated care. His silver eyes had gone distant, almost haunted. Fine, he said. Just ... Memories, sometimes these old pieces trigger unexpected memories, but the way he said memories made me think he meant something different than I would. Something more immediate, more personal. Have you ever felt like you were living in two different time periods simultaneously? Like the present moment was just a thin layer covering something much deeper and older? That was the sensation washing over me as I watched Lucien struggle with whatever the miniature had awakened in him. Perhaps we should continue another time, he said. His composure was returning, but I could see the effort it required. I seemed to be more affected by these pieces than I expected, of course, I said, though disappointment made my chest tight. But you're welcome to come back any time to see the rest. He moved toward the door, and I followed, hating that our afternoon together was ending. Uncertain when I would see him again, at the front door, he paused, his hand on the handle, but his eyes on mine. Evelyn, he said, there are things about me, about my life, that might seem strange, difficult to understand. Everyone has secrets, I said. I'm not going to judge you for yours. Something in his expression shifted, softened, like I'd said exactly what he needed to hear. You're remarkable, he said. More remarkable than you know. He leaned forward and kissed my forehead again, just as he had the night before. But this time the contact lingered, his lips warm against my skin, his breath stirring my hair. My entire body responded to that simple touch, every nerve ending lighting up with want. When he pulled back, I could see hunger in his silver eyes, raw and desperate and barely contained. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me properly, might cross that boundary between restraint and surrender. Instead, he opened the door and stepped out onto Royal Street. Soon, he said, just as he had before, but this time the promise felt more urgent, more immediate. I watched through my window as he walked away, moving with that fluid grace that seemed almost supernatural. When he reached the corner, he turned back. Our eyes met through the glass one final time. Then he disappeared into the gathering dusk. I stood there for long minutes, heart racing, skin still tingling from his kiss. The shop felt empty without him, like all the life had drained out of it the moment he left, but questions were beginning to surface. Uncomfortable questions I'd been avoiding since the moment we met. How did he know so much about my antiques? Why did old pieces seem to trigger such strong reactions in him? What were these memories he spoke of with such weight? Those of you who have fallen fast and hard know this feeling. When desire wars with common sense, when every instinct tells you to be careful, but your heart insists on diving headfirst into the unknown. I returned to the back room and looked at the miniature he'd been holding. The young woman with sad eyes stared back at me, beautiful and melancholy and somehow familiar, like I'd seen her face before in dreams or half-remembered visions. I picked up the small portrait and felt nothing unusual. No temperature change, no whispers, just smooth ivory and careful brushwork. Whatever Lucien had experienced had been his alone, but as I wrapped the miniature in tissue paper, I found myself wondering about the woman in the portrait, about Lucien's reaction to her, about the secrets he carried and whether I was brave enough to discover what they were. The sun was setting outside my windows, painting Ryle Street in shades of gold and amber. Soon night would fall, and with it perhaps answers to questions I was only beginning to know how to ask. That night I dreamed of silver eyes and whispered secrets, of hands that moved with impossible grace and lips that promised forever. But underneath the desire was something else, something that made me wake with my heart hammering against my ribs and the taste of fear on my tongue. I'd been in a grand ballroom, candlelight flickering off crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Music from another century filled the air, violins and harpsichord creating melodies that belonged to a world of corsets and powdered wigs and elaborate courtesy. Lucien had been there, but not as I knew him. He wore clothes from the 18th century, a dark velvet coat with silver buttons, his hair longer than it was now, tied back with a ribbon that gleamed like moonlight. He moved through the crowd with fluid elegance, every woman's eyes following his path across the polished floor, but it was the woman beside him that made my breath catch. The same face from the miniature I'd unwrapped yesterday. Dark hair swept up in elaborate curls, sad eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sorrow. She wore a gown the color of midnight, and at her throat a necklace of garnets that caught the light like drops of blood dot in the dream they danced, moving together with a kind of perfect synchronization that spoke of deep familiarity, of bodies that knew each other intimately, of souls that had found their match across time and circumstance. But as the music swelled, something changed. The woman's face grew pale. Her steps faltered, and when she looked up at Lucien, her eyes held not love but terror. Pure, undiluted terror that made her beautiful features contort with anguish. That was when I woke, gasping, sheets soaked with perspiration, despite the cool October air flowing through my bedroom window. Know how some dreams feel more real than waking life? How they leave images burned into your memory with such clarity you can still see them hours later. This was one of those dreams, so vivid I could still smell the wax from those ballroom candles, still hear the echo of 18th century music. But why had I dreamed of that particular woman? The one from the miniature. And why had she looked at Lucien with such fear? In my limited experience with him, he'd been nothing but gentle, courteous, almost impossibly considerate. I made coffee and tried to shake off the lingering unease. Dreams were just dreams, random firings of neurons during sleep. They didn't mean anything significant, certainly didn't predict the future or reveal hidden truths about people I'd known for exactly 2 days. But as I showered and dressed, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Lucien had reacted to that miniature yesterday, the way his entire body had gone rigid, like he'd seen a ghost, or perhaps remembered being one. Stop it, I told myself firmly. You're being ridiculous. He's just a man. An interesting, unusual man, but still fundamentally human. The alternative was too strange to contemplate seriously. Yet, as I walked to my shop, I found myself seeing New Orleans differently. The French Quarter had always felt touched by otherworldly magic. But this morning, the shadows seemed deeper, the wrought iron balconies more elaborate, like stage sets designed for dramas that transcended ordinary human experience. I unlocked Cross Antiques and went through my morning routine, but I kept glancing toward the back room where those 3 crates waited, specifically toward the miniature that had triggered such a strong reaction in Lucien. Part of me wanted to examine it more closely, search for clues about the woman it depicted, but another part feared what I might discover. The morning passed quietly. A few tourists browsed without buying anything significant. Mrs. Henderson returned to look at a cameo brooch she'd been considering, but my mind remained elsewhere, focused on silver eyes and 18th century ballrooms and promises of soon that felt increasingly urgent. Around noon, I decided to research the miniature. I photographed it from several angles and uploaded the images to a database used by antique dealers and auction houses. Within minutes, I had preliminary results. The portrait had been painted by Jean-Baptiste Isabey, a French miniaturist who worked primarily in the late 1700s and early 1800s. The style and costume suggested a date around 1790. The woman appeared to be aristocracy based on her jewelry and dress, but there was no identification of who she might have been. I was reading through additional details when the shop door chimed. I looked up expecting a customer, but found Lucien standing in the entrance. In broad daylight, he looked even more impossibly perfect. Skin pale as porcelain, but somehow luminous. Hair so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And those silver eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. "Good morning," he said. His voice carried that same velvet quality that made my pulse quicken. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, I said, though my hands trembled slightly as I minimized the browser window containing my research. Just cataloging some new pieces. He moved toward the counter with that fluid grace I was beginning to recognize as distinctly his. Today he wore a dark sweater that emphasized the lean lines of his torso. And again, that subtle scent of midnight jasmine and something indefinably masculine that made my head spin with wanting. You mentioned yesterday that you restore antiques, I said. What kind of restoration do you specialize in? Something flickered across his features. Too quick to interpret, but unmistakably uncomfortable. Various types, he said. Objects that have been damaged by time. Circumstances beyond their control. I help them reclaim what they've lost. That's remarkably noble work, I said. Most people see antiques as investments or decorations, but you speak about them like they're living things. Aren't they in a way, he asked. Every object carries the essence of its previous owners, their hopes and dreams and tragedies. When you restore something properly, you're not just repairing physical damage. You're healing emotional wounds that have accumulated over decades or centuries. His words resonated with something deep inside me. This was exactly how I felt about my collection. Each piece had a soul that transcended its material components. But most people thought I was being overly sentimental when I expressed such ideas. Those of us who work with antiques understand this connection. How objects can hold onto the energy of their previous owners. How touching something old can sometimes trigger flashes of memory or emotion that don't belong to us. Where did you learn restoration? I asked. Do you have formal training? I've been studying the techniques for a very long time, he said. Longer than most people would believe possible. Again, that sense of words carrying multiple meanings. Like he was telling me something important in language I didn't quite understand yet. The shop door chimed again and a couple entered looking for anniversary gifts. I excused myself to help them, but remained acutely aware of Lucien's presence. The way he moved through my shop with familiar ease, like he'd been here many times before rather than just yesterday. When the couple left with a lovely Art Nouveau vase, I found Lucien standing before the case containing the miniature. His expression was unreadable, but his posture radiated tension. You've been researching this piece, he said. It wasn't a question. How could he know that? I'd minimized the browser window before he arrived. Had he somehow seen my screen from across the room? That seemed impossible, but just trying to learn more about the artist, I said. Jean-Baptiste Isabey. He was quite renowned in his time. Lucien's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, he was, he said quietly. He painted many of the French aristocracy before the Revolution and after. For those who survived, you sound like you know his work personally, I observed. Are you familiar with this particular piece? He was quiet for so long, I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Her name was Celeste Dubois, he said. She was 19 when this was painted. The daughter of a marquis who lost his head to the guillotine 6 months later. The specificity of his knowledge sent chills down my spine. How could he know such detailed information about a woman who had died over 2 centuries ago? Unless, what happened to her, I asked. After her father's execution, Lucien's hands clenched into fists at his sides. She fled Paris, he said. Came to the American colonies, hoping to start a new life. But the terror followed her. The revolution had made monsters of ordinary men. And some monsters are more literal than others. His words carried weight that went beyond historical fact. Like he was speaking from personal experience rather than academic knowledge. Like he had been there, had witnessed events firsthand, but that was impossible. Wasn't it? You speak as if you knew her personally, I said. My voice came out shakier than I intended. He turned to look at me, and the pain in his silver eyes was so raw it took my breath away. I did know her, he said simply. Very well. The admission hung in the air between us. Impossible, but somehow true. I felt my rational mind struggling to process what he was telling me. How could he have known someone who died over 200 years ago? How could anyone, unless they had lived that long themselves? The thought formed before I could stop. It ridiculous, impossible, but it would explain so much. His encyclopedic knowledge of antiques, his familiarity with historical periods that felt personal rather than academic, the way he moved with grace that seemed from another era entirely. Those of you who have ever had your worldview challenged know this feeling. When everything you thought you knew suddenly becomes questionable. When impossible explanations start making more sense than rational ones. I think I need to sit down, I said. My legs felt unsteady, like the floor beneath me was shifting. Lucien moved toward me immediately, his hand touching my arm to steady me. The contact sent familiar electricity through my system, but this time it was accompanied by something else. A sense of recognition so deep it made my chest ache with longing. Evelyn, he said, his voice full of concern. Are you all right? I don't know, I admitted. Nothing about this makes sense. You, me, the things you know. The way being near you feels like what he prompted gently. Like coming home, I whispered. Like remembering something I'd forgotten. Something important. His silver eyes searched my face with an intensity that made me feel transparent. Like he could see straight through to my soul and was reading secrets I didn't know I possessed. There are things about me, he said carefully. About what I am. That most people would find difficult to accept. Impossible to believe. Try me, I said. Though my voice sounded far away, even to my own ears, he was quiet for so long. I thought he might have changed his mind about confiding in me. When he finally spoke, the words came out in a rush. Like he was afraid he'd lose courage if he hesitated. I am not what you would call entirely human, he said. I am something older. Something that exists between the world of the living and the world of the dead. I have walked this earth for over 1,000 years. I have loved and lost more times than any soul should have to endure. And I have been searching for something, someone, for longer than most civilizations have existed. The words should have sounded insane, should have sent me running for the door. But instead, they felt like puzzle pieces clicking into place, like the missing explanation for everything that had seemed strange or impossible about him. What are you? I asked. Though part of me already knew the answer, had known it on some level since the moment our eyes met across that crowded jazz club. I am what your stories call a vampire, he said. Though the reality is both simpler and more complex than fiction would have you believe. I do not burst into flames in sunlight, though I prefer darkness. I do not sleep in coffins, though I require very little rest. I do not kill innocents for blood, though I do require it to survive. Anyone who has ever had their reality fundamentally altered knows this sensation, when the impossible becomes not just possible, but inevitable. When everything that seemed strange suddenly makes perfect sense. And Celeste, I asked, what was she to you? She was what you might call my eternal love, he said. The one soul in all my centuries of existence who truly saw me, who accepted what I was without fear or revulsion, who loved me despite the darkness that defines my nature, was I asked. Past tense. His expression grew infinitely sad. She died, he said simply, as mortals do. Time took her from me as it has taken everyone I have ever cared about. Until now, the way he said, until now made my heart race with possibility and terror in equal measure. What did he mean? What was he trying to tell me? You feel it too, he continued. The connection between us, the recognition, like we have known each other across lifetimes. I did feel it, had felt it from the moment our eyes met. That inexplicable certainty that this man was significant. That meeting him had changed everything about my life's trajectory, but you're saying I single quotes from Dot what exactly I asked. A reincarnation? The same soul in a different body? I don't know, he admitted. All I know is that when I look at you, I see her. Not physically. You're beautiful in your own unique way, but the essence, the spirit, the way you move through the world with such grace and intelligence and compassion. It's her. You're her. The implications of what he was saying made my head spin. If I was somehow the reincarnation of Celeste Dubois, then what did that mean for us? For whatever was growing between us, was I falling in love with Lucien? Or was I simply remembering a love that had existed centuries ago? This is a lot to process, I said. Understatement of the year. I know, he said. I debated whether to tell you at all. Whether it was fair to burden you with knowledge that might frighten you away. But I couldn't keep lying. Couldn't pretend to be. Something I'm not when every instinct is screaming that you're meant to be part of my world. Your world, I repeated. What exactly does that entail? Immortality, he said simply, if you choose it. If you can accept what I am and what loving me would mean for your future, for your very existence. The offer hung between us like a bridge spanning impossible distance. On one side was my ordinary human life, predictable, safe, limited on. The other was something beyond my wildest imagination, love that transcended time itself, but also danger, uncertainty, the complete abandonment of everything I thought I knew about reality. Those of you who have ever faced life-changing decisions know this moment. When you stand at a crossroads and realize that choosing either path will irrevocably alter who you are. When there is no going back to ignorance once knowledge has been gained. I need time, I said finally, to think, to understand what you're asking of me, Dot. Of course, he said immediately. This is not a decision to be made lightly. Take all the time you need. I have waited over 200 years to find you again. I can wait longer if necessary. But as he spoke those words, something shifted in his expression, a flicker of something that looked like fear. Or perhaps urgency. Dot, is there a time limit? I asked. Some reason I can't take as long as I need to decide. He hesitated, which in itself was answer enough. There are others of my kind, he said finally, who do not approve of vampires forming attachments to mortals, who see such connections as weakness. Dangerous weakness that must be eliminated before it can spread. Eliminated, I repeated. You mean they would hurt me? They would try, he said, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before, but I would not let that happen. I would die before I let anyone harm you. The fierce protectiveness in his tone made my chest tight with emotion. No one had ever spoken about me with such absolute certainty. Such willingness to sacrifice everything for my safety, but it also made the danger real in ways I hadn't fully grasped. This wasn't just about choosing between ordinary life and extraordinary love. This was about survival itself. How much time do we have? I asked. Weeks at most, he said. Maybe less. They know I'm here. No, I found someone important to me. It won't take them long to discover who you are and where to find you. The urgency in his words made my heart race with panic. Days or weeks to make a decision that would affect the rest of my existence. However long or short that might prove to be. What happens if I say no? I asked. If I decide I can't handle this world you're offering. Pain flashed across his features so quickly I almost missed it. Then you continue your life as it was, he said, and I disappear from it completely. Find somewhere far from here where my presence won't put you at risk. The thought of never seeing him again made my chest ache with loss. Despite everything he just told me, despite the danger and impossibility of it all, I couldn't imagine my world without those silver eyes. Without that voice that made my pulse race, without the possibility of love that transcended every boundary I'd ever accepted as immutable. I don't want you to disappear, I said before I could stop myself. He stepped closer. close enough that I could feel warmth radiating from his body, could smell that intoxicating scent that made my head spin with wanting. Then don't make me, he said softly. Choose me. Choose us. Choose forever. His hand cupped my cheek with infinite gentleness, his thumb tracing the line of my cheekbone with reverence that made my breath catch. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me. Really kiss me this time, rather than those chaste touches to my forehead. But before either of us could move, the shop door chimed. We sprang apart like guilty teenagers as Sarah walked in carrying coffee and what looked like fresh bayonets. She stopped short when she saw Lucien, her eyes widening as she took in his impossible beauty and the obvious intimacy of the moment she'd interrupted. Oh, she said. Sorry. I didn't realize you had company. Sarah, this is Lucien, I said, my voice coming out slightly breathless. Lucien, this is my friend Sarah. Lucien recovered his composure with remarkable speed, moving forward to offer Sarah a slate bow that belonged to another century entirely. A pleasure to meet you, he said. Evelyn has mentioned you. Sarah shot me a look that clearly said we would be discussing this later, in great detail. Nice to meet you too, she said. I brought lunch if you're interested, though I can come back later if you're busy. Actually, I should be going, Lucien said. I have appointments this afternoon, but thank you for the kind offer. He turned back to me, and the intensity in his silver eyes made my knees weak. Think about what we discussed, he said quietly, but not too long. Time is shorter than we might wish. He headed toward the door, but paused at the threshold. Soon, he said, just as he had before. But this time the word carried weight of prophecy rather than promise. After he left, Sarah stared at me with unconcealed amazement. Holy hell, she said. Where did you find him? And please tell me you're planning to keep him. It's complicated, I said, which was perhaps the greatest understatement in the history of human speech. Those of you who have supernatural secrets know how impossible it is to explain them to normal people. How do you tell your best friend that the man you're falling in love with is a 1,000-year-old vampire? How do you describe decisions that involve choosing between mortality and forever? But as I watched Lucien disappear down Royal Street, I realized the decision was already made. Had been made the moment our eyes met across that crowded jazz club. I was his just as surely as he was mine. Everything else was just details to be worked out. The only question now was whether I was brave enough to admit it. To myself. To him. To the universe that had waited over 2 centuries to bring us back together. Sarah waited exactly 30 seconds after Lucien left before pouncing. She set down the coffee and bayonets and crossed her arms like a lawyer preparing for cross-examination. Okay, she said. Spill everything. And I mean everything. Who is he? Where did he come from? Why do you look like someone just rearranged your entire universe? How do you explain the unexplainable? How do you tell your best friend that the man who just walked out of your shop claims to be a 1,000-year-old vampire? That he believes you're the reincarnation of his lost love from the 18th century? That you have weeks to decide whether to become immortal or lose him forever. It's complicated, I said again. Knowing how inadequate that sounded. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Complicated how? Married? Criminal? Secretly related to you? What are we talking about here? None of those things, I said. Just different from anyone I've ever met. Different, how she pressed. Because from where I was standing, it looked like you two were about to spontaneously combust from sexual tension. Which is great, by the way. It's been way too long since you looked at a man like that. Those of you with protective friends know this interrogation style. Sarah had appointed herself my guardian after my divorce. She'd watched me retreat into solitude for 3 years, seen me build walls around my heart that most men couldn't even find, let alone breach. Finding someone who affected me this strongly would be cause for celebration in her book. Only she knew what she was celebrating. He's just very intense, I said. Old-fashioned in some ways, worldly in others. I'm still trying to figure him out. Sarah studied my expression with the kind of focused attention she usually reserved for court cases. There's something you're not telling me, she said. Something big. The shop door chimed before I could fumble for another evasion. Mrs. Henderson entered carrying a small wrapped package. I brought that cameo brooch back, she announced. The one I was considering yesterday. I decided it's perfect for my granddaughter's birthday. I helped Mrs. Henderson complete her purchase while Sarah waited with obvious impatience. The older woman chatted about family and weather and the changes she'd seen in the French Quarter over the decades. Normal conversation that felt surreal after everything Lucien had revealed when Mrs. Henderson finally left. Sarah immediately resumed her questioning, but I held up a hand to stop her. I need to close early today, I said. There are things I need to think about. Important things. What kind of things, she asked. Her lawyer instinct sensing something significant. Life-changing things, I admitted. The kind that affect everything about your future. Sarah's expression grew serious. Evelyn, you're scaring me. What's going on? Did something happen with the mystery man? His name is Lucien, I said. And yes, something happened. Something I'm still trying to process. She waited for more, but I couldn't find words that wouldn't sound insane. How do you explain that your understanding of reality had just been completely rewritten? That impossible things were not only possible, but standing right in front of you, asking you to choose. Forever. I need time to think, I said finally. Can we talk tomorrow? When I have a better handle on everything. Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have convinced her this was serious. Of course, she said. But I'm here if you need me. Day or night. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out together. After she left, I flipped the sign to close and locked the door. The shop felt different now, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Every shadow seemed deeper, every antique more mysterious. Like Lucien's revelations had awakened something that had been sleeping in the very walls. I returned to the back room and looked again at the miniature of Celeste Dubois. Her dark hair and sad eyes seemed more familiar now, more personal. Was I really looking at my own face from another lifetime? The thought should have been ridiculous, but felt surprisingly natural. Know how sometimes you meet someone and feel instant recognition? Like you've known them forever, even though you just met. That was how looking at Celeste felt. Not like seeing a stranger, but like remembering a dream. I picked up the small portrait and immediately felt something shift. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Shadows gathered in corners where they hadn't been before. And from somewhere very far away, I heard the sound of music. Violins and harpsichord playing a melody that belonged to another century. The same music from my dream. I set the miniature down quickly, but the sensations didn't fade. If anything, they grew stronger. The room around me seemed to flicker, like reality was a candle flame guttering in an unfelt wind. For just a moment, I wasn't in my cluttered back room surrounded by packing materials and storage shelves. I was in a grand ballroom, candlelight reflecting off crystal chandeliers and marble floors. The scent of powder and perfume and something darker underneath. I wore a gown the color of midnight. Heavy silk that rustled when I moved. At my throat, a necklace of garnets that felt cold against my skin. And across the crowded room, silver eyes found mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. Lucien, but not as I knew him. His hair longer, his clothes from another era, moving toward me with that same fluid grace, but carrying an edge of desperation I'd never seen before. Celeste, he said, and his voice held such relief, such joy, that my chest ached with recognition. I thought I'd lost you, never heard myself say, though the voice wasn't quite my own. We belong together. In this life and every life that follows, But even as we embraced, I could feel danger approaching. Something dark and hungry moving through the ballroom like a predator stalking prey. Other vampires. Ancient ones who saw our love as weakness, as betrayal of everything they believed about our kind. "They're coming," I whispered against Lucien's chest. "We have to run, too late," he said. His silver eyes already distant, already calculating odds that didn't favor us. "But I won't let them hurt you." Not again. The vision faded as abruptly as it had come. I found myself standing in my back room, surrounded by perfectly ordinary packing crates and inventory sheets. But my heart was racing like I'd just run a marathon. My hands shaking with residual terror. What had I just experienced? A memory from a past life? A psychic impression left behind by the miniature? Or simply my imagination running wild after everything Lucien had told me? But deep in my bones, I knew it had been real. As real as anything I'd ever experienced. I was Celeste Dubois, had been Celeste Dubois, and somewhere in the layers of my consciousness, her memories were waiting to resurface. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize but somehow knew belonged to Lucien. "Are you all right?" I felt something shift, like you were in distress. How could he have sensed that? We were miles apart, but I found myself texting back immediately. Had a strange experience with Celeste's miniature. Saw flashes of what might have been memories. "Is that possible?" His response came within seconds. "Very possible. The connection between souls transcends physical death. You're beginning to remember. We need to talk. Tonight, if you're willing." Those of you who have ever stood at life's crossroads know this feeling. When you realize there's no going back to ignorance. When moving forward means accepting truths that will change everything about how you see yourself and the world around you. I typed back, quickly before I could lose courage. "Yes. When and where? My apartment. After sunset. There are things I need to show you. Things that will help you understand what choosing this life would mean." I spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze of anticipation and terror. Part of me wanted to run, to pack a bag and disappear before sunset arrived and made this all real. But a larger part couldn't wait to see him again, to learn more about the world he was offering, to explore the connection that felt deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. As evening approached, I changed clothes 3 times. What did you wear to visit a vampire? To discuss becoming immortal? To potentially say goodbye to everything human about yourself? Finally, I settled on a simple black dress. Elegant but not overly formal. The kind of outfit that could work for seduction or funeral with equal appropriateness. The walk to my apartment building felt different than usual. Every shadow seemed alive with possibility. Every passerby looked potentially supernatural. Was that woman walking her dog actually human? Did that street musician have fangs? How many immortals moved through New Orleans hidden in plain sight? You know how awareness changes perception? Once you know something exists, you start seeing evidence of it everywhere. Tonight, the French Quarter felt like a stage set for supernatural drama. Like the normal world was just a thin veneer over something much older and more dangerous. Lucien was waiting in my building's courtyard when I arrived. He stood perfectly still in the gathering dusk, so motionless he could have been carved from marble. But when he saw me, his entire face transformed with a smile that made my chest tight with longing. "You came," he said, like he genuinely feared I might change my mind. "I said I would," I replied, though my voice came out shakier than I'd intended. We climbed the stairs to my apartment in silence, but I was acutely aware of his presence beside me, the way he moved with that uncanny grace, the subtle scent of midnight jasmine that clung to his skin, the electricity that seemed to arc between us whenever we were near. My apartment looked different with him in it. Smaller somehow, but also more alive. Like his presence had awakened something in the very walls. Colors seemed more vivid, shadows more defined. Even the air felt charged with possibility. Can I offer you something to drink? I asked, then realized how ridiculous that sounded. What did you offer a vampire? Wine? Blood? Did he even consume normal beverages? Wine would be lovely, he said, apparently reading my confusion. I can consume most things humans do. Blood is a necessity, not an exclusive diet. The casual mention of blood should have been disturbing. Instead, I found it oddly reassuring. Like he was treating me as someone who could handle uncomfortable truths rather than someone who needed to be protected from reality. I poured 2 glasses of red wine and we settled on my sofa, close enough that I could feel warmth radiating from his body but not quite touching. The space between us hummed with tension. You said there were things you needed to show me, I said. He nodded and reached into his coat. Withdrew what looked like a leather-bound journal, very old from the appearance. The kind of book that belonged in a museum rather than someone's pocket. This contains Celeste's story, he said. Her own words about what happened between us, about how she died, about the choice she made and what it cost her. He handed me the journal and I felt the same electric shock I'd experienced when touching the miniature, but stronger this time. More personal, like greeting an old friend after years of separation. The leather was soft with age, the pages yellowed and fragile, but the handwriting inside was clear. Elegant script in French that I somehow found myself able to read, despite never having studied the language. My dearest Lucien, the first entry began. If you are reading this, then I am gone and you are once again alone in this world. I pray that someday you will forgive me for the choice I made, for choosing mortal death over immortal love. Those of you who have ever read love letters know how intimate they feel, like glimpsing someone's naked soul. But this was more than intimacy. This was recognition. These were my own thoughts and feelings written in handwriting, I remembered, forming. I could not bear the thought of becoming what you are, the journal continued. Not because I feared the darkness, but because I feared losing myself within it. The woman you love would cease to exist, replaced by something that might wear her face but no longer possess her soul. Tears blurred my vision as I read. I could feel Celeste's anguish as if it were my own. Her desperate love for Lucien warring with her terror of transformation. The impossible choice between losing him to mortality or losing herself to immortality. You know this pain if you've ever had to choose between love and identity, between becoming something new for someone else or remaining yourself and losing them forever. It's a choice no one should have to make, but one that defines us completely. I cannot ask you to understand, Celeste had written, only to remember that my love for you is real. That in whatever life comes next, I will search for you, will find you, will love you again if fate allows such miracles. I closed the journal and looked up at Lucien. His silver eyes held such pain, such longing, that my heart ached in response. She chose death, I said, rather than become like you. He nodded, could not speak for a moment. When he finally found his voice, it was rough with centuries of grief. I offered her eternity, he said, and she chose 3 more years of mortality instead. I watched her age and sicken and die while I remained unchanged, helpless to save her from the choice she'd made. Anyone who has lost someone they loved knows this particular agony. The way grief becomes a constant companion, how it changes the very fabric of who you are. But Lucien had carried this pain for over 200 years, had lived with the knowledge that the woman he adored had chosen death over forever with him. But she also chose to find you again, I said. She wrote about searching for you in whatever life came next. He leaned forward, silver eyes intense with hope. Do you believe that's possible? That souls can find each other across lifetimes? that love can transcend even death itself. Looking at him, I felt certainty settle in my chest like warm honey. Yes, I said. I do believe it. And I think we're proof of it. His hand reached for mine where it rested on the journal, fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture that felt both electric and inevitable. Like coming home after a journey I'd forgotten taking. Then you know why I had to find you again, he said. Why losing you a second time would destroy whatever remains of my humanity, the vulnerability. And his admission made my chest tight with emotion. This immortal being who had survived 1,000 years was afraid. Afraid I would make the same choice Celeste had made. Afraid he would spend another 2 centuries waiting for love that might never return. Those of you who have the power to heal someone's deepest wounds know how precious that responsibility is. How it feels to hold someone's broken heart in your hands and have the choice to mend it or shatter it. Completely, I won't make the same choice she did, I said. The words surprised me with their certainty. But as soon as I spoke them, I knew they were true. His grip on my hand tightened. You're sure? You understand what you're agreeing to. Immortality means exactly that. Forever. No going back. No changing your mind when the reality becomes difficult. I'm sure I said, though my voice was barely above a whisper. I love you. Not just Lucien, the man I met 3 days ago, but the soul I've been searching for my entire life without knowing it. I can't lose that again. Won't lose it. Relief flooded his features so completely that he looked like a different person, younger, less burdened by centuries of solitude and grief. The transformation isn't easy, he warned. It requires my blood in your system. Then death. Then resurrection into something new. The process is intense, painful. There's no guarantee your mortal mind will survive intact, but there's no guarantee it won't, I countered. And the alternative is losing each other. That's not acceptable. He brought our joined hands to his lips, pressed a gentle kiss to my knuckles that sent fire racing through my veins when he asked, how much time do you need to prepare? I thought about my shop, my friends, the mundane details of a mortal life I was about to leave behind forever. How do you prepare to abandon everything you've ever known for love? Sarah will worry, I said. She thinks something terrible happened to me when I disappear. You don't have to disappear entirely, he said. Vampires aren't mythological creatures hiding in crypts. We live among humans, work alongside them, love them. The main differences are dietary and temporal. So I could keep my shop, I asked. Continue my life, but with you in it. He smiled, the expression transforming his face completely. We could be partners, he said, in every sense. Your knowledge of antiques combined with my centuries of experience. We could build something beautiful together. The future he was painting felt too wonderful to be real. Love that lasted forever. Work that I was passionate about. A partner who understood me completely. After 3 years of solitude and resignation, it felt like winning an impossible lottery. Those of you who have been offered everything you ever wanted know this moment of suspended disbelief. When happiness feels too large to accept. When you keep waiting for the catch that will make it all disappear. But looking into Lucien's silver eyes, I saw only truth. Only love that had waited centuries for this chance. Only hope that maybe this time forever would actually mean forever. Tonight I said, before I can lose courage, before other vampires find us, before anything else goes wrong, he searched my face with the intensity that had captivated me from the beginning. Are you absolutely certain? Once we begin, there's no stopping the process. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I said, and meant it completely. He leaned forward slowly, giving me every opportunity to change my mind, to pull away, to choose safety over love. Instead, I met him halfway. Our lips touched for the first time, and the world exploded into sensation. fire and silk and coming alive all at once. Every nerve ending in my body lit up with recognition, with homecoming, with the certainty that this was what I'd been waiting for my entire life. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard, both shaking with the intensity of connection that transcended the physical. How, he asked, voice rough with desire and something deeper. How do you want to do this? I looked around my apartment, at the life I was about to leave behind, at the future I was about to embrace. Here I said, in my bedroom, surrounded by things that matter to me. I want my last moments as immortal to be beautiful. He stood and offered me his hand. When I took it, electricity shot through my entire system, like touching a live wire, like coming home. Are you ready? He asked. For forever, I said. With you. Yes, Dot. And as he led me toward my bedroom, I felt Celeste's spirit settling peacefully in my chest. Like she was finally able to rest, knowing that this time love would triumph over fear. This time forever would actually mean forever. My bedroom felt different as we entered, charged with anticipation and something deeper, something that made the very air shimmer like heat rising from summer pavement. Every shadow seemed alive, every surface touched by otherworldly light that had nothing to do with the lamps I'd left burning. Lucien moved to the window and drew the curtains closed. Not because he feared sunlight, but because what we were about to do required privacy from more than human eyes, other vampires. I asked. Already watching us, he nodded grimly. They've been circling closer all day, waiting for the right moment to strike. We don't have much time. The urgency in his words made my heart race, but not with fear, with anticipation, with the certainty that whatever happened next would change everything about who I was and who I might become. You know that feeling when you stand on the edge of a cliff, when every instinct screams danger, but your soul yearns to fly? That was this moment for me. The precipice between mortality and forever. How does it work? I asked. The transformation. Lucien sat on the edge of my bed, his silver eyes serious as he explained what I was about to experience. First you drink from me, he said. My blood will begin changing your cellular structure immediately. Then you die. Complete cardiac arrest. No breathing. No pulse. For most people, the process takes between 3 and 5 minutes. That sounds terrifying, I admitted. It is, he said honestly. The most frightening experience you'll ever have. Your human consciousness will fight the change, will try to cling to what it knows, but you have to let go completely. Trust that I'll bring you back, and if something goes wrong, if I don't come back, pain flashed across his features, then I'll follow you into whatever comes next, he said simply. I won't exist in a world that doesn't contain you. The absolute certainty in his voice made my chest tight with emotion. This immortal being was willing to die rather than face eternity without me. How could I be anything less than completely brave in return? I'm ready, I said, though my voice trembled slightly. Show me what I need to do. He moved closer on the bed until we were sitting face to face, close enough that I could see flecks of starlight in his silver eyes, could smell that intoxicating scent of midnight jasmine and something indefinably him. His hand cupped my cheek with infinite gentleness. Are you absolutely certain? Once we begin, I'll finally be able to love you the way you deserve, I interrupted, without the shadow of mortality hanging over us, without fear of time stealing what we've found. Those of you who have ever made life-changing decisions know this moment of absolute clarity, when doubt falls away and you know with perfect certainty what you must do. When the future crystallizes into something so beautiful, you'd risk everything to claim it. Lucien leaned forward and kissed me again, soft and reverent at first, then deeper as desire overwhelmed restraint. I could taste forever on his lips, could feel eternity calling my name, When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard, both trembling with need that transcended the physical. Now, he asked, voice rough with emotion. Now, I confirmed. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a forearm pale as marble and perfectly sculpted. In the lamplight, I could see the faint network of veins beneath translucent skin dot my wrist. He said, offering his arm to me. The blood flows closest to the surface there. It will be easier. I took his wrist in my hands and felt pulse beneath my fingertips. Strong and steady and somehow ancient. Like it had been beating for 1,000 years and would beat for 1,000 more. How much I asked Dot enough to feel the change begin, he said. You'll know when to stop. I brought his wrist to my lips and hesitated. This was the moment of no return. The choice that would define the rest of my existence, but looking into his silver eyes, I saw only love, only hope, only the promise of forever that I'd been searching for my entire life without knowing it. I bit down gently. His skin was softer than I'd expected. The taste of his blood was nothing like I'd imagined, not metallic or harsh. Instead, it was warm and rich. Like wine made from starlight and moonbeams, the effect was immediate. Fire raced through my veins. My vision became impossibly sharp. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Could smell jasmine blooming in gardens miles away. Could taste colors on my tongue. Enough, he said gently. And I found myself pulling back despite wanting more, needing more. The hunger was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Know what I asked? My voice sounded different, deeper somehow, more resonant. Now you rest, he said. The change will happen gradually. Your body will slow down first, then stop completely. I'll be with you every moment. I lay back against my pillows and immediately felt the shift beginning. My heartbeat, which had been racing, began to slow. Each breath came harder, like I was breathing through honey instead of air. Don't fight it, Lucien said, his hand stroking my hair with infinite tenderness. Let yourself go. Trust me to bring you back. But as my human life began to ebb away, I found myself thinking of everything I was leaving behind. Sarah's friendship, the morning routine at my shop, the simple pleasures of mortal existence that I'd never experience again. You'll have new experiences, he said, as if reading my thoughts. Better ones. We'll travel the world together, see things most humans never dream of, love each other across centuries instead of decades. The promise in his words eased the fear that was trying to take hold. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The start of something more beautiful than I could imagine. My vision began to tunnel. Darkness creeping in from the edges like curtains being slowly drawn. But I wasn't alone in the darkness. Lucien's presence surrounded me, warm and safe and infinitely loving. I love you, I whispered with what might have been my last mortal breath. I love you too, he replied. In this life and every life that follows. And then there was nothing, floating in vast emptiness that felt both terrifying and peaceful. No heartbeat, no breath, no connection to the physical world at all. Just consciousness suspended in space between life and death. But I wasn't alone. Even here in this place between worlds, I could feel him. His love wrapping around me like shelter in a storm. His voice calling me back from whatever abyss was trying to claim me. Come back to me, he whispered. Come back to forever. And slowly and possibly, I felt myself returning. Not to the life I'd known, but to something infinitely more. Air rushed into lungs that worked differently now. Blood began flowing through veins that carry new purpose. Eyes opened on a world transformed. The first thing I saw was his face. Silver eyes bright with relief and joy and love so intense it took my breath away. The second thing I noticed was how different everything looked. Colors more vivid. Details impossibly sharp. Like someone had removed a filter I hadn't known was there. How do you feel? He asked, Different, I said. My voice came out like music, like every word was a note in a symphony. Everything is so intense. He smiled, the expression lighting up the entire room. That's normal, he said. All your senses are enhanced now. You'll learn to control them with time. I sat up slowly, testing my new body. Every movement felt fluid, graceful, like I was dancing even while sitting still. When I looked down at my hands, they seemed to glow with inner light. Am I beautiful? I asked. The question surprised me with its vanity. You were always beautiful, he said. Now you're luminous. He helped me stand and led me to the mirror above my dresser. The reflection that looked back was definitely me, but perfected. Skin luminous as pearl, eyes that held depths of starlight, hair that moved like silk in unfelt wind. Those of you who have ever seen yourself transformed know this moment of recognition and strangeness combined. This was my face, but also not my face. My body, but also something more. How long before I fully adjust? I asked. Weeks for the physical changes, he said. Decades for the emotional ones. Becoming immortal isn't just about living forever. It's about learning to think in terms of centuries instead of years. To love without the desperate urgency that comes from knowing time is limited. But even as he spoke, I felt something shift in the air. A change in pressure that made my newly sensitive skin prickle with warning. They're here, he said grimly, moving toward the window with fluid grace that matched my own. We need to leave. Now, who's here? I asked, though part of me already knew. The Council of Ancients. Vampires who believe our kind should remain separate from humans, who see love between immortal and mortal as weakness. Dangerous weakness that must be eliminated. But I'm not mortal anymore, I pointed out. No, he said. But you were when they decided you were a threat. And they don't forgive easily. The sound of footsteps echoed in the courtyard below. Too many footsteps. Moving with the same preternatural grace that I was still adjusting to. How many? I asked. 5, he said. Ancient ones. Powerful ones. We can't fight them directly. Our only option is to run. Then let's run, I said. Though the idea of fleeing from my own home made something fierce and new stir in my chest. Something that didn't want to hide from danger but face it head on. You know how transformation changes more than just physical capabilities. How becoming something new awakens aspects of personality you never knew existed. I felt strength flowing through me now. Confidence that had nothing to do with my mortal experience and everything to do with what I'd become. There's a back way out, through the building service entrance, he said. If we move quickly. But before he could finish the sentence, my bedroom window exploded inward. Glass fragments caught the lamplight like falling stars as 5 figures flowed into the room with terrifying grace. They were beautiful in the way that predators are beautiful. Perfect features and flowing movement that spoke of centuries of refinement. But their eyes held coldness that made winter look warm. Ancient hatred that had been cultivated over millennia. Lucien stepped in front of me protectively. His entire body coiled for violence that I could sense building like electricity in a storm cloud. Marcus, he said to the vampire who had entered first. A tall figure with pale hair and eyes like chips of ice. I expected you might come. You always were predictable, Marcus replied. His voice carried accents from a dozen different languages, from centuries of travel and conquest. Did you think the council would ignore your latest indiscretion? Indiscretion, Lucien repeated, his tone carrying dangerous edge. I call it love, Marcus laughed. The sound held no warmth at all. Love, he said, between immortal and mortal. It's weakness. Sentimentality that makes us vulnerable to humans who would destroy us if they knew what we were. She's not mortal anymore, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice came out stronger than I'd expected, more authoritative. Like I was channeling something ancient and powerful. All 5 vampires turned to look at me, their expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt to something that might have been respect. Newly turned Marcus observed. Still warm with human blood, still clinging to mortal attachments. I love him, I said simply. That will never change. Immortality or mortality makes no difference. Pretty words, another vampire said. This one a woman with dark hair and cruel eyes. But love fades, especially when measured in centuries instead of decades. You'll grow tired of him, he'll grow tired of you, and then what remains but boredom and regret. Those of you who have had your love questioned by others know this particular anger. When people who don't understand what you share try to diminish it, try to reduce forever to something temporary and small. You don't know what you're talking about, I said. My voice carrying power I didn't know I possessed. This love has already survived death once. It will survive whatever you think you can do to us. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Death once. How interesting. And how impossible. She's Celeste, Lucien said quietly. Reborn, the same soul in a different body. Silence fell like a curtain. The 5 ancient vampires exchanged glances that spoke of knowledge I didn't yet possess. Of history that went deeper than anything I understood. Celeste Marcus said finally. The human who chose death over transformation, who broke our kind's most sacred rule about love between species. What rule, I asked. Rule that says once a mortal learns our true nature, they must be turned or killed, Marcus said. Never allowed to remain human with knowledge that could destroy us all. But she chose death, Lucien said. She protected your secrets even at the cost of her own life. And now she's back, Marcus replied. With the same dangerous sentimentality, the same weakness that nearly exposed us 2 centuries ago. I felt anger building in my chest. Not the hot flash of human temper, but something colder, more dangerous. Something that spoke of power I was only beginning to understand. Enough, I said. The word came out with force that made the windows rattle. You want to punish me for love, for choosing immortality with someone who makes existence worthwhile. But love isn't weakness. It's strength. It's what makes forever meaningful instead of just endless. The vampires stared at me with something that might have been surprise. Newly turned immortals weren't supposed to have this kind of presence, this kind of command. You know how sometimes you discover capabilities you never knew you possessed. How crisis brings out aspects of yourself that surprise even you. Standing there facing 5 ancient predators, I felt power flowing through me like electricity. Like I was channeling something far older than my new immortal body. She has potential, Marcus admitted. But potential for what? Power or destruction? Strength or dangerous sentiment that will eventually doom us all? Only one way to find out, another vampire said. Test her. See what she's really capable of when pushed. Before I could ask what kind of test they meant, Marcus moved. Vampire speed that turned him into blur of motion aimed directly at Lucien's heart. But I moved faster. Somehow I was between them. My hand wrapped around Marcus's wrist with strength that stopped his attack completely. The look of shock on his ancient face was almost comical. Impossible, he breathed. New vampires don't have this kind of power. Maybe I'm not entirely new, I said. Maybe some souls carry strength across lifetimes. Maybe love really does transcend the boundaries you've spent centuries trying to enforce. I released his wrist and stepped back, but kept myself positioned between the council and Lucien, ready to fight if they pressed the issue. Fascinating, the dark-haired woman said. She's channeling something. Past life memories, perhaps. Or something deeper. Whatever I'm channeling, I said, it's telling me you have a choice. Accept that love between immortals can be strength instead of weakness. Or try to fight something that's already survived 2 centuries and will survive. Whatever you throw at it now, Marcus studied me with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. When he finally spoke, his voice carried grudging respect. "Very well," he said. "We'll allow this experiment to continue, but with conditions. What kind of conditions?" Lucien asked, his voice tight with suspicion. "You'll be watched," Marcus said. "Both of you. Any sign that your attachment makes you careless. Any hint that your love threatens the secrecy we've maintained for millennia. And we'll finish what we came here to do tonight." "Understood," I said before Lucien could object. "We'll prove that love makes us stronger, not weaker. That forever means something when it's shared." The 5 ancient vampires moved toward the shattered window with fluid grace. But Marcus paused at the threshold and looked back. "For your sake," he said, "I hope you're right. Because if you're wrong, the consequences will be severe. For both of you. And then they were gone, flowing out into the New Orleans night like smoke dissipating in wind. Lucien and I stood alone in my bedroom, surrounded by glittering glass and the lingering scent of otherworldly power. My hands were shaking with adrenaline, my new vampire senses overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. "That was incredible," he said. "I've never seen a newly turned vampire stand up to the council like that. Never seen anyone stop Marcus mid-attack. I don't know where it came from," I admitted. "It felt like channeling someone else. Someone stronger," Celeste, he said softly. "She was always braver than she knew. More powerful than she allowed herself to believe. Do you think they'll really leave us alone?" I asked. "For now," he said. But Marcus was right about being watched. "We'll need to be careful. Prove that our love strengthens rather than weakens." I moved to the broken window and looked out at the French Quarter spread below. My immortal eyes could see details that would have been invisible before. Every shadow, every movement, every sign of life in the city that would now be my eternal home. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we begin," he said, coming to stand beside me. "Forever starts tonight." He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I leaned into his embrace, feeling safer than I ever had as immortal, more complete than I'd thought possible. But as we stood there watching the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all too perfect, too beautiful. Too much like a dream that might shatter if examined too closely. "What if none of this is real?" I whispered. "What if I'm lying in my shop having some kind of breakdown? What if you're just something my lonely heart created to fill the emptiness?" Lucien's arms tightened around me. His lips pressed against my hair in a kiss that felt more real than reality. "Does it matter?" he asked. "If this is dream or truth, if we exist in the world of waking or sleeping, all that matters is that we exist together, that we found each other across time and death and impossibility." "You're right," I said, though doubt continued to whisper at the edges of my consciousness. "Real or imagined love like this is worth whatever price we pay for it. Those of you who have ever questioned the nature of your own reality know this uncertainty. When life becomes so extraordinary that you wonder if you've slipped into fantasy, when happiness feels too large to be true." But as I stood in Lucien's arms looking out at the eternal night, I decided it didn't matter. Dream or reality, we had found each other. We had chosen forever, and that was more than most people got in a single lifetime. The French Quarter stretched out before us in all its supernatural glory. A city where impossible things happened every night, where magic lived alongside mundane, where love could transcend death itself if you were brave enough to believe. Somewhere in the shadows, other immortals walked, carrying their own stories of loss and love and hope that transcended human understanding. Tomorrow we would join their ranks officially, begin our eternal dance through centuries yet to come. But tonight was ours alone. Our first night of forever. Our first taste of love that would never age or fade or die. I closed my eyes and let myself sink deeper into the dream. Whether it was real or imagined didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was the feeling of silver eyes watching over me, of promises that stretched beyond the boundaries of time. And as sleep began to claim my newly immortal consciousness, I heard him whisper the words that had started it all, the promise that had brought us together across impossible distances. Soon, he said, just as he had that first night in the jazz club, just as he had outside my apartment, just as he would say for all the nights to come, soon had become now. Now had become forever, and forever stretched out before us like a song that would never end. Sweet dreams, he whispered. My eternal love, my immortal heart, my forever dot, and in the space between sleeping and waking, between dream and reality, between mortal and immortal, I found the peace I'd been searching for my entire life, the peace of love that transcends every boundary, every limitation, every fear, the peace of forever beginning right now.